you know, you were on the call. She has so much to share, and then I will share at the end just some anecdotal things. But with the new requirements that have just been implemented, I wonder if, Joe, you want to take that away?
Sure, that's fine. Joe, take it away.
You're muted, Joe.
I should say good morning. It's good to get together with this group. I always learn so much, so thank you for always including me. As many of you know, CMS has issued new guidance in the form of the QSO 2038 memo. And this memo speaks directly to testing in nursing homes and requires testing of staff. And the testing requirements are based on the positivity rate in the county that the nursing home resides. There is a website that you can go on to find what your county's positivity rate is. And nursing homes are required to go in there and check and base their testing on that reporting. I think the first and the third Mondays of each month. So you should be, as the medical director, I think, be very involved in the testing protocols and the testing policies that they have to develop. Also, each nursing home is required to have at least one part-time person designated as their infection preventionist. And this person does need to be an employee of the nursing home. And they do have to have completed the specialized training. CDC developed some training for that, as well as the American Healthcare Association created some training for that. And so either one of those would be training that would be acceptable. And I know CHCA received some grant funding from CMP funding to help pay for the tuition for the American Healthcare Association training. So, NN has said there's some money left for that, so there should not be any reason that anyone cannot find that training. This person also needs to participate in the QA meetings, and infection control certainly needs to be discussed at these meetings. And any concerns, problems with audits, any of those kinds of things, surveys needs to be shared at those meetings, and action plans developed from those QA meetings. Let's see. If you have one person that tests positive, then you need to test all your staff and all your residents. And for CMS, one positive test is an outbreak for CMS. So that is different than our state. So, so make sure you note that difference, because you do have to report the CMS, the positives, well, positives and negatives, but know that with one positive, CMS is seeing that as an outbreak, and that is the information that will be continue to be used, as well as the NHSN information to determine what infection control surveys we will be conducting. And those infection control surveys are going to continue for the foreseeable future. They haven't determined that those are going to go away at all. So do know that there is a difference in what is considered an outbreak. And there have been changes in the survey tool that CMS has developed for the infection control surveys. Many of the changes, I believe, are things that we were already asking for and looking at when we were on survey, but there are some new things. So please look at that and help educate your homes on that process and what we will be looking for. It's all in red, and there's a lot of red on the form. So please check that out and help your homes have a good infection control survey. Also, for the testing, there has to be physician orders for the testing for both staff and residents. Those can be standing orders. So, but it's important that you have those, and you have those in the resident file and the staff file. And testing results also need to be in the resident file and the staff files. And along with the survey process, we now will be asking to look at 3 resident files and 3 staff files to show that this information is in there. And they will be, we will be looking at any COVID residents that are in there. So, so we will be looking at their charts as well. Let's see. I think there's probably more to talk about on that memo, but I think if you have questions, or if Anne has other things she wants to do for an update with that, that would be great. We can sort of maybe tag team some of that as well.
Thank you, Joe. Does anybody have any questions for Joe before we move on to Anne? You can put your questions in the chat.
Yeah. Hey, Joe. Greg Gahm.
Hi.
I've got a couple questions. We keep getting asked for residents, it's pretty easy. If they refuse the test, they can refuse the test. The bigger issue keeps coming up with staff.
Right.
And of course, there are all kinds of different circumstances, you know, whether you have an outbreak or you don't have an outbreak. But if you have an outbreak, the way I read the rules, they either get.
Are you there? You went on mute.
Mute.
It sounded to me, oh, there he is, good.
It muted me.
Yeah, didn't want to hear you.
Travis did that. Nonetheless, south of Colorado's Mason-Dixon line, anywhere, up near 90% of staff are refusing to be tested. You can't take 90% of your staff home. What are we going to do?
I obviously don't have the answer for that. And of course, CMS says they should go home and be quarantined during that 14-day period if you have an outbreak. But you're right, you can't send that many people home. I think you have to have policies and procedures in place for what you will do. That's what we will be looking for.
So that's a problem, though. What if the policy is we can't run the place with half the people gone, so we're just going to allow them not to be tested? That doesn't sound like that would be in compliance with anything.
Right.
Hey, Dr. Gahm and Joe, this is Margaret. I think you're right. It's not in compliance with the rule as written. What CMS has started to do is have weekly calls with all the states, and they do take questions ahead of time to try to prepare for these calls. So we can certainly submit that question to see if CMS has a good response or not. Right now, we've been directed to write a deficiency, and the facility has been told to send their staff home, and yet in reality, business needs to occur. So I think as Joe was saying, the best you can do right now is have a thoughtful policy on what it is that you can do and how you're going to encourage your staff to get tested, and we'll work to find an answer from CMS.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret. And as I read the detail in the new regulations, it does default to some state or other jurisdiction guidelines in this
Right.
area. And so maybe, by the way, I don't know what power the strike force has at this point in time, but it certainly should be something we should address and try to recommend that we create a policy, because it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, we can certainly follow up with Peter about that too. Put it on the list of things for Peter to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
He needs some things.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hi,
Yeah,
Stan Kirstein, could I ask a quick question? You said you need to have an order for the patients, and that's relatively easy because they have physicians, but who's the order going to come from the staff? Is that going to be the medical director, or where are you going to get an order that you need to keep track of?
CMS guidance certainly does not say where that needs to come from. I think it's each home needs to decide how they're going to do that and who they're going to get that order from. If they're going to have each individual person get an order, or if their medical director is going to write those orders.
Probably easier for the medical director
Yep.
for the home to write a standing requirement.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. Also, Joe, we talked about this a little bit in the previous meeting, but there is a stipulation in the new rule that if you don't get your results within 48 hours, you have to document that you notified the state and local health departments. But even running from the state lab, I don't know of anybody who's gotten it within 48 hours. So does that mean that every once a week or every 2 weeks we have to kind of make that phone call to show documentation that we haven't received our results within 48 hours?
I don't think that a system's been developed yet to how that reporting is going to be done. So Margaret, I don't know if you have a better answer than that, but I don't think that's been
No,
developed
again,
at this point.
CMS put a requirement into the memo without asking the states how this is going to happen. So we
Right.
don't have a good answer for that right now.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I know that's something else that maybe the strike force or, the state CDPHE could give us some guidance on. When you have guidance, will you share it with us just so we're aware?
Sure.
Okay, great. Anybody else have any other questions for Joe, Margaret, before we go on to Anne?
One of the buildings was asking when the 5-star ratings will resume being calculated. I guess, was there a freeze because of the pandemic?
There was
Yeah.
a freeze, but it's my understanding that has already begun, but I haven't looked recently either. But they were supposed to have undone that freeze, so I don't know.
Yeah, I think the memo that came out that talked about reopening America, I think that's when they were going to get back to doing the 5-star, and that was a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
I agree. That's what I would understand too.
Thank you both. Thank you everyone for joining this call. We're so grateful for CDPHE to partner with us and CHCA. So Anne, you want to give us an update as well?
Sure. Just quick to add on to Joe's discussion. Another hot topic for us are the antigen testing machines, and I know there are many varied, very strong opinions on them, but CMS has recognized the antigen test under these new guidelines for testing. Under the new guidelines, all staff in every building have to be tested at least monthly, and it sounds like CMS is saying to use the antigen test, which I think there's questions about its reliability. In the positivity rate question, there are only, I believe, there are only four counties that are significantly impacted. Garfield, Montrose, and Washington are what's called a yellow, stage yellow. They will need to be testing their staff at least weekly. Then there is one county, which is Prowers, that is considered a red category. they will need to be testing their staff twice a week. Great, with turnaround times under 48 hours. So anyway, those are the two areas that probably we're spending most of our time on. I will mention that on September 10th, Chris Mangiano from Harmony Healthcare is going to do a webinar recapping all of the COVID waivers and their status now, just for anyone who's interested. I know I've lost track of a lot of status of the waivers too. So thank you for the time, and thank you, Dr. Eber.
Thank you, Anne. Also, I was wondering, Joe, do you think you could put the link to the new, the summary for the CMS rule in the chat box, perhaps?
Sure.
Thank you. And also, I can send out the summary as well to all the CMDA members. Thank you, everyone, for the updates. They're really helpful and really imperative. Right now, I want to introduce Alex Donovan, who is a board-certified chaplain for Compassus Hospice and UCHealth. We're thrilled to have her here today to talk about moral distress during COVID-19. Alex, welcome, and we're so pleased that you're here today.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here and grateful to get to know you all. Moral distress is something I've been thinking a lot due to the pandemic. It's something that actually applies to our industry quite a bit, but I think, as with a lot of things, COVID-19 is helping us to put names and thought and framework around some of the particular ways we're experiencing fatigue and burnout. So I'm excited to dive into this with you guys. And I know Sing is going to be looking at the chat box. Please feel free to throw questions, comments in there at any point. I'm happy to be interrupted at any time. I'm going to try to keep this talk to 30 minutes for your time, but I do want it to be more of a conversation. So anything you want to throw in there. If you're on the phone, you can also just jump in, unmute yourself. I'm great being interrupted. So thank you. Next slide. Just a little overview of what I want to cover today, kind of getting to understand the differences between moral distress and moral injury. And I'm going to throw a third category in there of moral fatigue, and these kind of exist on a spectrum, so helping us to put some names to these. We'll watch a short video from the Shea Center for Moral Injury that I think is a really helpful introduction to the topic for us. We'll have a quick poll in time for some more questions, and then we'll end with a meditation to leave us on a good note. All right. And then this is just a little framework for helping us unpack what it is when we talk about burnout and fatigue. Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers used to say, if it's mentionable, it's manageable. So it's not that these distinctions are a little bit arbitrary, but I find it helpful to put some names to and kind of break down the different ways that we're experiencing fatigue so that we can understand them better. And all of these categories are things we experience at high levels in the healthcare industry. Trauma, grief, moral injury, which we'll talk about today, and just basic wear and tear, fatigue. And all of these, if unchecked, can lead to burnout. So these are all worth addressing. And actually, we've had discussions in our hospice company on all those topics, but we'll focus on moral distress today because I think it's one that we don't tend to talk about a lot, but it applies to us quite heavily in healthcare. Just a few references for you all to have, and that I will refer to a little bit throughout the time. There's a great article in the Medical Economics Journal called Now It Is Moral Injury. So the term moral injury comes from veterans, work with veterans, PTSD, wartime. And for a while there's been a debate, can this term apply to healthcare? Because typically for a soldier on the front line, there's moral distress based on what the soldier is asked to do. The soldier's life is also at stake. And typically in our field, our lives being on the front line are not at stake. Well, now that's different. And so that's what the premise for this article. It's also just a really good introduction. This article by Carrie Doring was the first one that helped me put a name to this kind of vague sense of wariness that I was feeling, especially as a chaplain. And she helps us identify the do no harm directive that we are all under as caregivers, and helping us to see how the do no harm value can actually kind of pull us in a different direction when we're wanting to see our patients, but we also have a value of doing no harm. That is kind of the heart of moral distress, that we are worried about doing harm by giving care or by seeing our family, right? The third article is not specific to COVID-19. It's a much older article, again, a good introduction to palliative care, but I refer to it a lot. Joan Halifax is a Zen Buddhist priest, a sociologist, and an end-of-life care specialist. Just a really great resource. And then just a note that all photos, all images in these slides are from the Shea Moral Injury Center. And for those of you on the phone, I'll send these slides out, or they're actually, Travis has them. You're welcome to send them out to anyone who wants these for posterity. So what is moral injury and moral distress? Go to the next slide. We'll start with moral distress. So on this spectrum, I'm going to put moral distress in the center. Moral injury is more extreme. And then I'm also going to talk at some point about what I'm calling moral fatigue. That's not a term I've heard people use, but I think it helps us to have just a sense of wariness too on one side of things. So we'll start with moral distress. Moral distress arises when we're aware of a moral problem. We know what to do, we determine a remedy, but we cannot act on it due to external or internal constraints. So we have this in our day-to-day lives, but it's especially pronounced during COVID-19, whether it's due to a shortage of staff, shortage of resources, or having to take care of our own health or the health of our staff teams. So it's awareness of a problem that typically in normal times we could meet that we're no longer able to meet. And then this is from Joan Halifax. Her definition is the pain or anguish affecting the mind, body, or relationships in response to a situation in which the person is aware of a moral problem, acknowledges moral responsibility, and makes a moral judgment about the correct action, yet as a result of real or perceived constraints, participates in perceived moral wrongdoing. So just more simply, it's also the constant strain of having to weigh competing values in the middle of a crisis. A good example of this that's not specific to COVID is one of my chaplain supervisors. She works at a hospital in Los Angeles, and she was asked to carry the pager at night, but due to budget constraints was told not to go in when she received a page. And so she would get a page about a fetal demise. She's got this burden on her heart. She knows that she could be there helping. She's also told she's not allowed to go. So that's a extreme but very typical example of moral distress in our industry that exists outside of COVID, but is especially pronounced right now. Okay. So some examples of moral distress. As we've been having discussions both in our staff team and as I've been giving a few of these talks, I've kind of amassed a list of different examples of moral distress. And so it's a lot. I'm going to pause and have you scan, and I'll read a couple of them out loud too for those of you on the phone. Some of these I would posit are more moral fatigue. I think we have fatigue from the constant micro decisions of, I walk into a patient's room and he says, take that mask off. I don't want to see that. I'm faced with the little micro decision of that, the human impulse, of course, I don't want this mask on either. And the impulse to do what's proper, what's right, what's safe, right? And so I think we have all those micro decisions we're making throughout our day, or bigger decisions. Do I go see my family? Knowing that I could bring this and get them sick. So I'll read a couple. Some of those are just fatigue, and some of those I think are true distress. So wondering if you're jeopardizing your family by continuing to see patients with COVID, not being able to spend the same amount of time or energy on a patient like you normally would due to high demand and thinner staff teams, having to decide when is the right time to bring a hospice team into a facility, so you're constantly weighing the values of care for the dying with protection of other residents, having to stay home from activities like protests, service opportunities, or social gatherings due to health concerns or concerns for your patient or patients or family, or going to those things and then wondering if you're jeopardizing your patients or family. So either way you do it, not that one's right or wrong, but the constant pull either way you choose. Knowing that a patient would benefit from a priest, but not being able to bring one in due to concern for other patients. Sheltering at home because you're older or immunocompromised when you know your skills could really be helping, whether that's in healthcare or volunteering at the local soup kitchen. Being told you can't see patients when you know they need you. Being asked to see patients when you know it's a health risk to you or when you are at the end of what you have to give. So whether or not it's COVID, that one we face all the time, being asked to see patients when you're just tapped out. The repeated question of, do I take my mask off? Again here, when a patient asks me to, constantly being torn between the human impulse and what's safe or correct, the trade-off between human needs such as hugs and healthcare needs, safety, and constantly weighing those two. And it can lead to kinds of thinking like, I thought I was a good nurse, I thought I was a good physician, I thought I was a good chaplain. I thought I was the kind of person who always showed up in someone's suffering, but now I'm questioning who I really am and what my values are. And it can also lead to survivor's guilt, or survivor's guilt can actually be another form of moral distress. So feeling bad that COVID hasn't hit your family when it's hit others, or your facility when it's hit others. Or not feeling bad for feeling relieved, right? We have distress about our relief. Okay, next slide. I'll just pause there. Anyone resonating with any of that? No, that was a lot. Yeah. I'm seeing some nods. Okay, and then the more extreme end of the spectrum is moral injury. So moral injury is a psychological wound as a result of a morally transgressive act, either one that you had to carry out or one that you participated in. A real typical example right now would be if in a hospital setting, being asked to remove a ventilator from an older patient and giving it to a younger patient due to triage policy. So like PTSI, another way of saying PTSD, like PTSD, this constellation of symptoms and causes arose out of the observations of soldiers returning from wartime. But the concept very much applies to any of those who are forced to partake in or witness actions that in normal life would absolutely go against their values. I see Carrie says she hadn't thought about the micro decisions. Interesting concept. Yeah, absolutely. So a good marker of moral distress too, but especially moral injury, is I would never have done this under normal circumstances or in normal life. And now I'm finding myself forced to carry out something that is transgressive to my moral code. Okay. So a few examples of moral injury in wartime setting. So being ordered to kill civilians. Killing in general generally goes against our moral code, but especially being asked to kill civilians. Feeling guilty for feeling relieved. This will come up in the video we'll watch, but the guilt of feeling relieved that a bomb hit another unit and not yours, or the other side and not you. And again, some pretty extreme examples in healthcare. Again, removing a ventilator due to triage policy. So not something that we would ever prioritize the young over the elderly necessarily, but due to triage policy, that is something that a lot of hospitals have had to carry out. Maybe less extreme, but still I think could be a true moral injury, having to tell families they can't come visit their dying loved ones, especially if that person dies before the family is able to visit. So that's moral injury for both us as caregivers and the family, right? And having to say no to requests to visit a dying patient. So if you're a priest, maybe being asked to give last rites, anyone being asked to provide support, to provide cares, and you have to say no due to concern for your health or your family's health, or due to external constraints such as company or facility policy. And I just wanted to note the distress can be higher if we have to make that decision on our own, and if the constraints are perceived to be subjective. There's more room for guilt and second guessing. So it really helps to have clear company policy in line, even though that can sometimes be the cause of distress. I'm not allowed to go. It still helps when that weight is not entirely on you and you don't have to continually second guess your decision. That's a huge source of the distress. Okay, and we'll pause and watch this 4-minute video from the Shea Moral Injury Center. And Travis, I think we're going to have to stop sharing and then hit share computer audio and sound in the little lower left-hand box.
Okay, so
So hit share screen, and then there'll be a little button in the lower left-hand corner that says share computer sound.
don't see that. I can share an application instead of just the screen.
Travis, this is Allison. And historically, I think also if you go down to audio and you click on the little caret, it'll give you a menu like audio options, and a little menu will come up and you'll see the option to share computer audio.
Oh, there we go. Hold on. All right, now let me try it.
Part of me was fractured. I was ashamed. When I came back from that war experience, what I lived with most of the time was a profound sadness and that feeling of powerlessness and helplessness is a large contributor to moral injury. I always said that I knew I would come home in one piece. I did, and I didn't.
There's a normal thing like moral distress. When you do something wrong, you feel pretty bad and you try to fix it somehow because you don't feel good about yourself, right? Until you apologize or make amends. But moral injury is just a much more extreme condition in which your conscience is at war with you. So we call it the war inside because your conscience can't make sense of an experience that wrecked your moral foundation.
I recall very vividly, almost every night in the mountains, there was firefighting going on. We were thankful that it wasn't us, and that is a dilemma as well. Am I my brother's keeper?
You feel like you're such a damaged person that you are no longer worthy of love, that you are inherently stained.
I was able to pretend that nothing bothered me, that it didn't affect me.
Volunteers of America is building and expanding on a track that will allow people to alleviate, cope with, and manage their suffering from moral injury. Some of the groups are doing yoga, some are doing music and art therapy.
We start them in writing an exercise that asks them to remember a with the trauma.
And finally, this resiliency strength training work has deepened my sense of humanity. It's restored my belief in humanity.
I lost a lot of friends.
I have found out some people do care. I have told my story. I have been shown love. I've been received with welcoming hugs. And finally, welcomed home.
So just as Travis pulls the slides back up, I know the video cut out a little bit, but the link will be on the slides if anyone wants to rewatch it. There have been a lot of parallels, especially at the beginning as we were getting used to the pandemic, comparing the pandemic with a feeling of being in wartime. And I think a big thing that comes out of that is the moral distress and the moral injury. And our goal is to protect one another from the true psychological wound of moral injury, and also to help heal that wound in one another by being that welcoming, listening ear. So that's the goal. Perfect. Thanks so much, Travis. So signs and symptoms of moral distress and moral injury. And Dr. Rita Brock in the video mentions moral distress in its positive sense, which is that when your conscience is bothering you, you've done something that goes against your code. Maybe you've told a lie to someone and you feel like, yeah, I need to set that straight. That's the constructive side of moral distress. But I do think there's a side of moral distress that's kind of a step down from true moral injury, in which we did nothing wrong. We've just been caught between two competing values, or we've caught in a time where we're under constraints, where we can't act, we can't live up to our moral code. So signs and symptoms of moral distress would be the could've, would've, should've. So if you find yourself constantly rethinking a decision, wondering if you could have done something better or more, ruminating, beating yourself up, inability to stop thinking about or second guessing a decision you made, such as, I said I couldn't go see that patient, but gosh, who am I? Why would I say no to that? You know, again, who am I if I'm not someone who shows up in suffering? And then this is Joan Halifax again, moral distress may undermine empathy, cause personal distress, and lead to moral outrage, burnout, or acute secondary stress. So these are symptoms that we may experience and not really realize that the root of the cause is our moral distress. And then the wound of moral injury, like the video shared, can lead to extreme anger, sadness, helplessness, loss of faith. And that could be faith in God, it could be faith in a benevolent universe, but more typically, I think it's loss of faith in yourself. Maybe there is a God, maybe the world is still good, but I'm no longer worthy of it, I don't deserve it. I hear the term, I think that the term hero, as much as people intended that to be a positive, uplifting thing applied to healthcare workers, could actually be its own cause of moral distress, because truth is, what you all do is heroic all the time, but now in this space, you may feel like you're actually failing at your job. And so ironically, the time you're being called a hero may be the time you're feeling like a failure. Hopefully not, but I have heard that sentiment. So the questions that might start to come to mind for moral injury: who am I now that I've had this experience? And an existential crisis. I thought I was a good person. I thought I was a good nurse or physician, social worker, chaplain would be it. And it can lead to a mix of dread, guilt, and shame. And really the primary symptom of all of this is shame. So we're gonna pause real quick and take a quick poll, and hopefully this will work. I apologize to those of you on the phone, but hopefully you can kind of do this on your own when you have the slides. But those of you who are able to access this poll, take a minute. It's completely anonymous, but click as many of these things as you relate to. And in a minute, we'll kind of pull the results. And then Travis, whenever it seems like the results are slowing down coming in, we probably won't have 100% participation, but whenever it seems like they're slowing down, go ahead and share results if you would.
Travis, can you end the poll, or I can see that I can end the poll, but okay, thank you.
Okay, great. And I'm going to read I know you just all read these, but I'm reading it out loud because the recording won't actually record the different options, and for those of you on the phone. So what symptoms of moral distress are we all experiencing? Ruminating, beating yourself up, inability to stop thinking about or second guessing a decision, 61%. A sense of guilt or shame about not seeing patients or not being with them more, 39%. Diminished sense of purpose or motivation, 61%. Diminished sense of self-worth, 35%. Loss of faith in self, your calling, your company, God, or a benevolent universe, 30%. Crisis of identity, who am I now? Who am I when things get hard? Who am I if not the hero? If I'm not the hero, others see me as, 30%. Anger or moral outrage, how dare people not wear masks? How dare someone ask me to visit a patient and put myself at risk? How dare they not allow me to see my patients or allow family members to visit, 65%. And then if you would scroll for me, Travis. Oh no, I can do it, okay. Feelings of pervading sadness, 61%. Feelings of helplessness or hopelessness, 39%. Okay, so significant. That's at least a third of us are experiencing every single one of these. And well over half are experiencing second guessing, ruminating, beating ourselves up, diminished purpose or motivation, anger and moral outrage, and which is a huge expression of moral distress and injury, and pervading sadness. Great. And probably we would have more if more people were able to access the poll. I actually think these results are a little bit down from when I've done this in the past, which gives me hope, but it's still, as you can see, really important for us to name these things, to know that we're not alone, and to start to understand why it might be that we're feeling this kind of nebulous sadness or helplessness or lack of motivation. Okay, great, thank you. We'll continue with the slides. Any questions or thoughts or responses to the poll? Okay, great. So I don't want to just leave you there. What are some things we can do to actually help ourselves given what we're experiencing? The most important thing truly is meaningful relationships, especially with trusted peers. So not friends or family who are going to say, oh, but you know, you're doing such a good job, you do such wonderful work, and kind of minimize the distress. Send along results of the poll. Yes, we can send the results of the poll. Absolutely. And that's really the way that we combat shame, which is the biggest marker, the biggest hallmark of moral distress and injury is shame. And the only way I know to combat shame is to share with someone who can see it and who can help you kind of liberate that hidden shame in a compassionate setting where you're not dismissed, but you're also not judged. So good peers that you can trust. Celebrating our small victories instead of going for perfectionism. What went well? Where did we help? There's a really great program through Duke University called 3 Good Things. They've studied the effects of this program, and it's been shown to be on par with Prozac. So what you do, you just get a text. If you follow this hyperlink, when you get the slides, it'll take you right to the sign-up page. You get a text every day about 5 o'clock. It's for only about 2 weeks in a row. So this is, you can do anything for 2 weeks. This is just a 2-week commitment. You get a text around 5 o'clock, and you list 3 things that went well during your day, and 3 things that, and the ways that you participated in those 3 good things, the role you played in making them happen. Very simple, but the idea is retraining, rewiring our brains. Our brains are trained to latch onto the bad. We call it Velcro brain. It's just part of our survival mechanism, how we've evolved. But we need to kind of help our brains do extra work and wire them so that they can also see the good. So the 3 Good Things program, it's deceptively simple. I highly recommend it. I did it at the beginning of COVID to try it out for myself, and I found it really effective. So that's something we can do for ourselves or for our teams. Journaling, expressive therapy is kind of like the video talked about. That's a way to get out the moral outrage, to get out the sadness. Finding other meaningful outlets, so protests, writing, whatever it is for you, writing petitions. And then mindfulness practices to help with self-awareness and self-regulation. So if we're able to come into our workplaces in a more grounded sense, we actually may be more aware of the choices that are before us. We may be less likely to make them out of a place of anxiety, which could lead to unnecessary moral distress. You know, maybe we would misstep if we're coming from a place of anxiety. And it helps us to know what's ours to control and what's not. This is a quote from one of those first articles I showed you in the Medical Economics Journal. that I think is important. He says, this is a time to make use of psychological support services. It is a time to be honest with oneself. It is a time to frequently monitor one's stress and coping and to listen to others who may be voicing concern in caring about you. Most health systems have scaled their professional assistance programs to meet the psychological demands of this pandemic and provide valuable short-term and more extended support for providers and their families. It truly is a time to be caring for ourselves first. All right, next slide. And then the flip side of that, how we can help others. So walk with others through difficult decisions, become aware of ways that we may be placing others in ethical conflict, become aware of ways that to avoid our own discomfort, we may outsource decision-making to our teammates, put them in distressing situations instead of sharing the decision-making. I see this a lot, especially in environments of high anxiety, where we feel the anxiety of a situation and we kind of pass the buck. So the more we can kind of be one another's guardians of distress, the more we can help our team. So example, I've seen this a lot actually, asking someone to visit a patient at 4:45 p.m. on a Friday, putting them in a position to have to say no. So you've received a distressing situation, you're aware of a distressing situation, and you put it on someone else instead of explaining company policy, or people's work schedules. Or I've seen this one too, asking an elderly minister to officiate a large funeral when you know that they should say no for their own safety. So just protect people from that situation if you can. We can't always, but how can we be guardians of one another's well-being? Let's see, making others aware of a need and asking them to help with that need opens them up to moral distress if they're unable to help be part of the solution, and especially if they are not kept in the loop about the result. So I've been the person asked at 4:45 on a Friday and had to say no. And I'd never heard what happened. And there I'm left with this constant sense of, was the need met? Should I have gone, right? So communication, again, is key. All right. Also, be open to listening to stories of distress. Don't dismiss the dilemma, such as, don't worry, you did the best you could, but really hear the struggle. I hear you trying to honor your family and also your calling at the same time. It sounds like that's really tearing you in two directions. And then as organizations and leaders. This is another quote from that article. Action to prevent or mitigate the development of moral injury begins with assuring resources are available, if they are, that protocols are consistent, clear and communicated, and environments are as safe as possible. And I was hearing a lot of our discussion at the beginning of this meeting through that lens, that we're trying our best to communicate policy and to know we're all on the same page so that we can act consistently and together. So clearly communicated and agreed upon guidelines, even if those change. Communicating to our staff teams that we are in this together and acknowledging that this is not business as usual. And this applies more to a hospital setting, but it can apply to homes as well. Clear triage rules. How are we making difficult decisions? What is our protocol? And then having a separate triage team that is not connected to the clinical team. So you remove the decision-making from those on the ground. And there's another great program called RISE, stands for Resilience in Stressful Events, and this started at Johns Hopkins. It's a peer-to-peer support program where peers, hopefully not in your department, are trained so that you can sign up to have a peer consultation with someone who's trained to be an active listener and who's a clinical peer who knows what it means to be in the healthcare setting, but can kind of help you work through, and especially a traumatic incident or one in which you experienced moral injury or distress. A patient died traumatically, or you feel like you failed in some way. So it's a place to go where you're not going to feel like your own team might judge you. They've got their own personal feelings wrapped up about the same encounter, right? So finding ways that you can have peer support you're on the same peer level. And Compassus has started to do this with their Colleagues for Colleagues program company-wide, so that if you email Colleagues for Colleagues, you get matched with someone not in your team. So it's more anonymous, more confidential. Okay. And then this is just a list of additional resources that you'll all have. It includes those 3 articles I mentioned and the RISE program and the 3 Good Things program. I also highly recommend the Short Center for Compassionate Healthcare, and I draw heavily on the Stress First Aid model from the National Center for PTSD. Okay. Any questions or thoughts before I wrap us up with a meditation? Sing, was there anything that came through the chat box that I missed?
I didn't see any additional questions. I know personally, Alex, I'm still reflecting on a lot of the points that you have made, and a lot of them really struck a chord with me. So
good, thank you.
Personally, I'm just thinking.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. Yeah,
Carrie Levy writes excellent in the chat box.
Oh, thank you, Carrie. Yeah, I'm still thinking too, really, to be honest. This is not an entirely new term for me, but this has really, COVID has been the catalyst for me better understanding moral distress and moral injury, because it applies to us in all of life, especially in our industry, right? But I'm oddly grateful to COVID for helping catalyze some of our thinking around this topic and some others. Okay. Well, I know that can be a heavy topic, so I'm actually going to wrap this up, and I don't want to cut off any questions. So if you have any at the end, you can still jump in, but I'm going to lead us in a mindfulness meditation. I have to be honest, I used to think that mindfulness was just kind of a buzzword. It is a trendy spiritual bypass, and it's not. The more I learn about mindfulness, it's really key to helping ourselves become balanced and to be self-regulated and to do our work well, to show up well for others. So I wrote this meditation specifically to help us kind of find some self-compassion amidst the moral distress. So wherever you are, if you feel comfortable, close your eyes and try to put 2 feet on the ground and just take a deep breath, get comfortable. And you can place your hands wherever is comfortable. I like to have them palms up on my legs. You can also place one hand on your heart, one on your stomach. And take one more deep inhale and exhale. Then I want you to bring to mind a time in your life as early as you can when you felt truly loved. Remember what it felt like to know that you were loved. This might be a specific memory or just a general feeling. What did that feel like in your body? What did it feel like in your heart? And are there any thoughts or emotions that come along with that feeling? And now I want you to remember a time in your life when you decided you wanted to truly love others, and when you decided you wanted to help others for a living. So maybe this is the time when you decided to become a physician or a nurse or administrator or any caregiving professional, or maybe it's more general than that. Pay attention to what that decision felt like in your body. Any thoughts or emotions that come with it. And are there any images or goals or resolutions that come to mind when you remember this decision? And it might not have been one decision, but more of a sense of mysterious pull. And now I want you to think of the people that have helped you along the way in this journey. Who are the people that are still helping? Maybe picture them in a circle surrounding you right now. Just know that they are still believing in you. Now I want you to remember a time when you absolutely excelled at what you do. A time that you just knew you had helped someone in a way that few others could. Feel how it feels to know you've done really beautiful work. Bring to mind anything that was spoken to you, or just your own sense of knowing, even if no one saw. Just continue to fill yourself up with that feeling of confidence and joy, and know that this is still part of you. You still know how to do this work. That hasn't gone anywhere. And now just thank your circle of guides. We may not always see them, but they're always there with us. And know that you might be a figure in someone else's circle. And finally, thank yourself for saying yes to this work. We'll take one last deep inhale and exhale. And then when you're ready, slowly open your eyes. All right, thank you. I will also send that meditation out along with the slides for anyone who wants that.
Thank you so much, Alex. We can't thank you enough for that presentation.
It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. I know it's 1 o'clock, and we have a few more things that we wanted to share with everyone. If people want to stay on for 5 minutes more, they're welcome to. We'll go a little bit over. We felt that this was such an amazing presentation. I certainly didn't want to cut it short. Okay, we're going to do a very quick update. So odd to switch gears in this way. For the strike force, myself and Dr. Gahm. And, you know, the strike force is still monitoring outbreaks and new COVID diagnoses for staff and residents, both diagnosed and probable COVID-19. We did have a bump in July, but we're better in August, which is delightful. We're going to send out a website that if you're having trouble with staffing, that the strike force has stood up for connecttocarejobs.com. And that's just like that, connecttocarejobs.com. The strike force has been incredibly receptive to provider ideas, and the indoor visitation recommendations and guidance is coming. It's in draft form right now, but it will be hopefully in the next week or so, we'll be able to share it and we'll send it out to CMDA members. It will have a lot of the same ideas as the outdoor visits, but we'll discuss visitors testing, and that will be something that will be new. Providers, as per the CMS new rule, need to be tested just like all staff. And you may need to develop a way to prove in another facility that you've been tested in another facility that you've gone to, so that you can have that documentation that may be asked of us. So just to be aware. And finally, this strike force is going to hold stakeholder meetings. And I wonder if Travis can put up that information. If you would like to give feedback to the strike force personally, every other Friday you have that opportunity. It's open to the public and to you. And we will send this out as well. And I know that Travis is just putting this on, and it's every other Friday, 10:30 to 11:30 a.m. The first one was just this past Friday, and so it's every other Friday. And I wonder, Travis, can you be, oh, great. And there's a webinar address as well as a phone number, 720-279-0026. And we'll send out that information as well. And then I'm going to pass along to Greg to do the second half of our strike force update.
Sure, we'll make this, I'll try to make this really quick. Opening up dining rooms again to communal dining and group activities are both going to be tied to the indoor visitation. That it's really odd the way that things are working. That's actually been released to the public already for comment. And then they wanted, I mean, they gave the guidelines and then they wanted comments even before they asked the strike team or anybody else. So we've sent comments back. There are parts of it that are just untenable and don't work, like mandatory 24-hour test results before you could visit, and a few other abnormalities. Those are actually going to be released either today or tomorrow, is my latest understanding, although that always seems to be up in the air. Real quick question. Joe or Margaret, are either of you still on?
I'm still here.
Okay.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
The question came up, if we open the doors and we test providers, a wound care doc, or even one of our own providers that goes to multiple buildings, and they test in our facility and they test positive, that has to be reported, but does it get counted against the facility that did the testing?
Oh.
And it be, you know, I didn't know how to answer it. I off the cuff, I said no, because they may go to 20 facilities and you're not going to call an outbreak in 20 facilities. But I don't know how to answer that. So, and I'm not sure putting you on the spot is fair. I'll let you guys talk about it. And then if you come up with an answer on how we should deal with that, let me know and I will pass the word.
Yeah, we're going to have to talk to our epi guys to see, because however the report comes in, it's probably going to get labeled somehow. And so if it does get attached to a facility, that's not fair. But I don't know if they have another way of consideration. So yeah, we'll get back to you.
Yeah, it was a good question.
Yeah.
Two last comments. Flu vaccine should be floating in anytime. It is not too early to start vaccinating staff. Anybody under 65 that's relatively healthy, you can do that anytime. For the high dose or the adjuvant vaccine, I'm still an advocate. You wait until at least mid-November, just due to immunosenescence. Flu doesn't have any idea, the virus itself, that there is even such a thing as COVID. So it is not going to change how it comes and when it comes, just to make things worse. If it does come early, I will let people know. We'll track that, let you know. The other thing just to be aware of, it's a little thing, but the high dose vaccine this year comes in 0.7 cc's instead of 0.5. So everybody's going to get 0.2 of an extra cc of fluid. It'll really help them out. No, it may have a little bit more reaction than normal. It's just more fluid. And then last, this Thursday, we are going to talk a little bit about antigen testing, the hyperimmune globulin, use of convalescent serum, and also just a quick overview of the vaccines and where they stand and what's coming out. And that's all I have to listen.
Thank you so much. I encourage everybody to join the Journal Club. It's going to be a blockbuster. I think this.
Oh yeah, I've got to put it together first.
Anyway, two more things really quickly. The CMDA Annual Conference this year is going to be virtual. Not a surprise. It's going to be on April 23rd, 2021. We will be sharing with you more information, but we're going to have phenomenal speakers, and it will be, I think it will be a really educational and useful conference. Finally, the Alzheimer's Association has worked with the Colorado Dementia Partnership, and they are giving an award, they want to a frontline staff member or a staff member that provides direct care in a nursing home, $500 reward and a plaque and a lot of good things. And they're taking nominations from all of us and anyone until September 15th. They're actually, I think, going to go beyond September 15th. So if you have somebody on September 16th, please fill out the nomination form. I think that Travis can show us the form, but we'll also send it out in the next few days so that we would make somebody's day, I imagine, for all of the hard work and diligence, the people who have gone above and beyond to care for our frail patients and have stuck with it. They deserve to be honored, each and every one of them. And so this is a way that we can start to honor and say thank you. So that's a great opportunity. And we look forward to seeing you next month. And we're going to be talking about flu and COVID-19. And so we're really hopeful that Greg Gahm joins us and helps us out with that. And thank you so much for spending some extra minutes with us. We hope you have a great day. Thank you. And we'll see you next month.